we got some serious nerfs this patch, but we also got a significant amount of buffs. Some really interesting stuff happened this time, and I've already seen it drastically start changing the meta. So we'll go through all of the major points of the patch notes. I'm not going to cover everything, just the important stuff. And then I'll talk about how the meta is shaping up, sorts of teams that aren't being played anymore, and some that are being played even more frequently than they were before, Umbre included. So let's go through the patch notes right now. So, the first thing we've got is the Doka nerf. So T0s were nerfed across the board. Some good examples of the Doka nerf are things like this at the top with the water Doka and the Omega damage, basically meaning that the stage 1 water Doka is only doing 315 now, whereas the stage 3 is doing significantly more than the stage 1 counterpart. Now, they did get nerfed a bit across the board, but pretty much the Omegas for all the T0 alluvials were nerfed significantly. Some of them changed a little bit. The most noticeable one is the Flish, where the Flish no longer silences its opponent, but rather gives lethargic or something like that. Or maybe it was the Water Volante. Now, they have less drastic silences and stuff like that. So with the Water Grocko, we can see this one got the biggest nerf. The biggest change here is that at all 3 stages, it was 30 energy it would take away from its opponent, but now it's significantly less for the stage 1 Grocko, and stage 3 Grocko still takes away quite a bit of energy. So you'll see this a lot across the board where the stage 3 of a T0 is still pretty okay. I mean, for their cost, they're very good, but nothing crazy, obviously. Earth Grocko as well, Fire Grocko, so all the Grokkos, all right? With Volante, we can see this even more, where the Omega damage was dropped quite a bit, probably the most out of all the different T0s. And the energy burn for the Water Volante, sorry, is what I was thinking of, was actually removed. It was pretty insane and just like destroying certain things. Even though Volante would die pretty quickly, it was still pretty disruptive. And you'll see the silence duration got dropped quite a bit as well. So even though their Omegas are mostly the same and the damage was dropped a bit, some of these secondary effects just aren't as good. The Water Flish, these got dropped quite a bit across the board. They actually deal a little bit more damage per tick almost, but there's less ticks that happen when they're casting their beam. The next thing we have is Atippo's Burial. Atippo got destroyed. It is pretty much dead now, especially the Omega radius got dropped across the board, especially on the stage 3 Atippos. The attack speed buff for Air Atippo is a lot less now, and the duration got cut by about 30-40%. The blind duration got cut by half. You can see that the Atippo, especially their secondary effects, they got absolutely destroyed. We've also got the Lynxes got quite a bit of a buff. Nothing crazy if you ask me. I still don't think they're particularly good. I've seen a lot more people using them. The Omega damage is a bit more, but their cast times take so long for the Stoic Lynxes, the tank ones in particular, that I just don't see them having that much more of an impact. Empath's Lynx did get nerfed while every other Lynx got buffed. So the Empath Lynx Virtuous Lynx has a much smaller Omega radius, and the max health heal is dropped in percentage. And this happened for all of the Empath Lynxes. So now we move on to non-Lynx, non-T0. Anteater got a huge buff. So that's Vermi, Vermilion, Vermilier. So Vermi got a huge nerf, where it's a lot worse now, but at the higher end, and you'll see this with a lot of the alluvials, it got quite a buff, incentivizing you to use some of the bigger, more powerful alluvials rather than stacking 5 Dokas on your board. The Umbre line, the Thylacine line, got a slight nerf, not nearly enough. I'm still seeing quite a few of them be played. The Dodo, Kuka, Kukulus, and Kukaraf got a pretty solid buff, I believe. Well, Kuka got nerfed a bit in the how long it stuns its opponent, and the focus damage for it, but Kukaraf is mostly unchanged. Actually, I changed my mind. So the next thing we got is Pangolin, the Pangolin line, so Flare, Singe, and Seer. Again, a little bit of a nerf at the stage 1 line, but actually quite a big buff for Seer itself. Its Omega damage got up by 5 points, so like 10-15%, and its damage reduction while spinning actually got up by 10%, 10-20%. And so it got a pretty decent buff. Blazenite got destroyed. Its attack speed buff and debuff both got murdered, so Blazenite's pretty much dead now. Wildfire also got a nerf. I don't think we talk about that today. Polar Bear got quite a bit of a buff, but its healing on its Omega just doesn't do enough. So I really tried to make it work, but I don't think the Polar Bear is going to see a whole lot of play. Joe Cool is actually not bad because it is Firefighter, I believe. It's Frost Fighter, so it's actually pretty good. And Gorilla got a brand new ability where when it summons the Gorilla statue, when it casts its Omega, that statue actually taunts. And what I have seen happen is a Gorilla will be attacking like a Dual F or something. It will dash away, and the taunt might actually cancel the Dual F beam. So there's a lot to love about this new Gorilla buff. So we're seeing a lot more Mud and a lot more Predator because they got buffed as well. So Mud buff. The attack speed debuff got increased. So your Mud units will now decrease their attack speed even more. Mud units are kind of underwhelming in general, so this isn't overly OP. But if you don't have an answer for it, if you don't set up accordingly, Mud can kick your ass. Magma, the damage from the magma on the ground actually got quite a buff, but the Grit and Resolve got a debuff. So it's a lot more of an offensive synergy now rather than a defensive one. Dust got a really big buff where you can shred up to, you can only get 2 dust on the board. So you can shred 20 Omega power from your opponents on cast. This does not count for where Gyro lands. It is where it casts from. Just a little hard to pull off, but I'm excited for the future of Dust as a synergy. Shock is quite interesting. It actually decreases the energy resistance of opponents when the shock comes down on them. I just don't think this is a high enough number, right? Bulwark is so common right now that decreasing 7 energy resistance, even if you have like 10 shock units, it's not really going to help as much as you might think. So I'm a bit underwhelmed with that. I'd like to see it get even stronger, but shock's already pretty decent. Empath got absolutely buried. The healing efficiency got dropped heaps, which was its main thing. The shield got dropped a lot. I don't really think too much about that. And the healing efficiency for empaths got dropped a lot at the lower threshold. So you either got 7 empath or you've got nothing, and even then, it's not that good. Berserker did get a buff though, where the attack speed it increases even faster than it did before, and the increased damage is the big one here. So with 3 Berserker, which is manageable, you can get 200% increased damage every 3 attacks, which is actually pretty solid. Berserkers are a little bit glass cannon, so I think it balances quite nicely, but this is a very interesting buff. The next thing is Behemoth got buffed. It is less attacks to trigger it, and the max health percent damage, especially at stage 2 with the 23%, is really noticeable. The problem is that the Behemoth just attacks so damn slow that it just doesn't seem to work. I've really tried to make it work, and it's okay, but it's just not that good. Colossus Taunt Radius got dropped. Not really a nerf. Colossus is still really, really good, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Revenant buff. They changed up the way Revenant works. So now if you have 2 Revenants at the back and they're both near each other, they're actually going to decrease the opponent's attack speed by 20% for every Revenant unit that's at the back. There's only 2 Revenants so far, Familiar and your Ranger, and so you can't get 3 of them, which would be pretty awesome. But the attack speed debuff is really interesting. So they're nerfing a lot of the augments that do this, and instead being like, if you want to destroy their attack speed, play the synergy that does that. Crit chance has gone up. Overall, it's okay. We need more Revenants to really make it work. Invoker got a big buff. Well, a pretty decent buff. Unexpected. Let me put it that way. Okay, augments. Let's move on to this. So, Hyperkinetic Stimulator got a pretty decent buff where now it can grant Omega power on combat start, which is a really big deal for setting up Harbinger. And for giving a little bit of a bump to something like a Squiz or a Dual F or something. This is a really big buff to every single thing, Scion, Invoker, whatever, in the game. So this is really interesting. So Fusion Igniter got a pretty solid nerf where the physical damage and energy damage you get from casting your Omega is a much lower percentage now. I definitely think it's still usable, but it's going to change up the way it's played a little bit. Photonic Unity got a really big change. So it used to be that you could grant energy to your entire team, or you could grant crit amp, but now the effects are quite different. So for bonus 1, for the first effect you can choose, you'll give your entire team Omega power and energy every 5 seconds, where for bonus 2, you would be giving them crit amp and crit chance. No one's going to use that. But for bonus 1, it's quite interesting. So now you can, I have used this a little bit. It's actually pretty sweet. It's pretty sweet. But you kind of need to stack all 3 across your team, or else you're not really getting a whole lot. But it's kind of like an extra water synergy for your entire team, which is pretty sweet. Parasitic Link. For 2 nearest allies get Omnivamp, he got nerfed. Okay? So let's quickly talk about this. Alright. What I'm seeing right now is Toxic Colossus is even more popular than it's ever been before. Colossus didn't really get a nerf. The physical and energy resistance from it is quite good. Invokers are kind of everywhere, and really the big way to deal with them is resistances. So Bulwark and Toxic Colossus is seeing a lot of play right now. Umbre hasn't really disappeared. I haven't seen it a whole lot, but it's still just as good as it was before. Between Untargetable, Indomitable, gaining a Mega Power, and now how easy it is to move a Mega Power onto it from Harbinger, Umbre is going to see even more play. So I think we're seeing a lot of more people try things like Mud and Berserker, but they don't actually deal with some of the most popular comps in the meta right now. So they're not actually going to see as much play, and if they are, they're going to get destroyed by these other things. So I hope you guys enjoyed the update on the different patch notes. Please have a good day.